Flight attendant Avonlea Maddox has endured mockery and disregard for months aboard transglobal flights. Today, as she stoically absorbs another dose of humiliation from arrogant executive Royce Hammerton, no one sees the precision in her movements or the discipline in her eyes. No one notices when she automatically shifts her balance during turbulence with a stance no civilian would know. But when military jets suddenly appear alongside their aircraft and a voice crackles through the speakers, everything is about to change. What happens next will leave everyone on board questioning who they truly fly with. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories about unsung heroes and the truth beneath appearances, consider subscribing for more untold tales that remind us to look deeper at those around us. The pre-flight ritual never changed. Avonlea Maddox moved through the cabin of Transglobal Flight 237 with practiced efficiency, checking seatbelts, overhead bins, and emergency exits. Her movements were precise, almost military in their exactness, though no one noticed. No one ever did. "Excuse me, sweetheart?" A voice cut through her mental checklist. Royce Hammerton, seat 14C Platinum member, hadn't bothered to look up from his phone. His Breitling watch caught the overhead light as he gestured impatiently. "This seat is unacceptable. I'm 6'2" and I need an exit row." "I apologize, Mr. Hammerton, but all exit row seats were assigned during check-in," Avonlea replied, her voice calm and practiced. "Federal regulations require all passengers to remain seated in their assigned positions for takeoff." "Listen, I don't have time for a safety lecture," Hammerton interrupted, finally looking up with the practiced disdain of someone accustomed to getting his way. "Just find me a better seat." Before Avonlea could respond, First Officer Darrow Caldwell emerged from the cockpit, his new uniform still creased from packaging, his authority worn like cologne. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his attention directed exclusively at Hammerton. "This seat is completely inadequate for a 5-hour flight," Hammerton complained. Caldwell nodded sympathetically. "Sir, if you'd like to stow your bag and get settled, I'll see what we can do after takeoff." "The flight is completely full," Avonlea noted quietly, "and FAA regulations require all passengers to remain in their assigned seats during takeoff and landing." "I think I can handle this, Ava," Caldwell said, deliberately using the wrong name. "It's Avonlea," she corrected, but he had already turned away, assuring Hammerton he'd take care of it. In the rear galley, Zephyr, barely 6 months into the job, was arranging drink carts. "What's with Mr. Important up there?" she whispered as Avonlea joined her. "Just another day in first class," Avonlea replied, reaching for the safety demonstration equipment. "You know, you never get upset," Zephyr observed. "You're almost robotic sometimes. Is it true you got fired from some government job?" Avonlea's hands paused for just a fraction of a second. "We all have our pasts," she said finally. As the flight prepared for takeoff, Avonlea stood in the aisle, demonstrating oxygen masks with movements so efficient they seemed choreographed. Her gaze swept across the cabin, assessing passengers with a practiced eye that missed nothing. An elderly man with a cane that might block an exit path. A woman traveling alone with 3 young children who might need extra assistance in an emergency. Hammerton, already 3 drinks in before wheels up, a potential problem if evacuation became necessary. These calculations happened automatically, a background process as constant as her heartbeat. When the turbulence hit an hour into the flight, passengers clutched armrests and overhead lights pinged on like constellations. Avonlea moved through the cabin with the steady gait of someone who'd navigated much worse than atmospheric pressure changes. When the plane dropped suddenly, she adjusted her balance with a subtle shift, weight centered, knees slightly bent, a stance no civilian would recognize. A retired Army sergeant in 19F noticed, his eyes narrowing slightly, but the moment passed as quickly as the turbulence. In row 23, a young boy of about 8 hyperventilated, eyes wide with fear. "Hey there," Avonlea said, crouching beside him. "I'm going to show you something special, okay?" She demonstrated a breathing technique, 4 counts in, hold for 7, out for 8. "I learned this from someone who flew in much scarier situations than this," she added with a hint of a smile. The boy's breathing steadied as he mimicked her. "Were they a pilot too?" he asked. Something flickered behind Avonlea's eyes, a memory perhaps, or a ghost. "Something like that," she replied. Back in first class, Hammerton had worked his way through 3 scotches when his elbow caught Avonlee's arm as she served the row behind him. Amber liquid splashed across her uniform. "Watch where you're going," he snapped, as though she had caused the collision. "My apologies, sir," she said automatically, reaching for napkins. "Jesus, don't they train you people?" he muttered, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Avonlea absorbed the humiliation with a dignity that suggested deeper reserves of patience than any flight attendant should need. In her eyes, however, was something hard and knowing, the look of someone who had endured far worse than entitled passengers, someone who had seen things that made spilled drinks seem inconsequential. But no one was looking at her eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." The intercom crackled 2 hours into the flight. "We're experiencing some unexpected weather systems ahead and will be adjusting our route. We'll be skirting along the edge of a restricted airspace zone where the Navy is conducting exercises in the Pacific. Nothing to worry about, just might see some military aircraft in the distance." Avonlea frowned, moving toward the cockpit door. The route change didn't make sense given the weather patterns she'd checked before boarding. Old habits died hard. She still reviewed flight plans and weather maps before every shift, though no one asked her to. The cabin lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. In the galley, the communications panel blinked with warning indicators. "That doesn't look good," Zephyr said, pointing to the flashing lights. Avonlea studied the panel, her brow furrowing. "The backup comm system is trying to engage. I should tell the captain." She knocked on the cockpit door, waited for access, and stepped inside. Captain Ellis looked up from the controls, his face lined with tension. "We're having communications issues," she began. First Officer Caldwell swiveled in his seat. "We're aware of the situation," he said dismissively. "The backup system is cycling improperly," Avonlea continued, ignoring him. "If it's the same issue as on the Airbus models, you need to reset the primary channels before the secondary fully engages." Caldwell snorted. "Let's leave the flying to those of us who actually went to flight school." Captain Ellis gave her an apologetic glance. "We'll handle it, Avonlea. Please return to the cabin." Back in the passenger area, the atmosphere had grown tense. Outside the windows, 2 sleek fighter jets had appeared, flanking the commercial aircraft at a distance. "Are those F-22s?" a passenger asked nervously. "Why are they following us?" another called out. The cabin lights flickered again, then dimmed completely before emergency lighting activated. The plane lurched, dropping several hundred feet in seconds. Oxygen masks deployed, swinging like pendulums above panicked faces. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Ellis's voice came through, strained. "Please remain calm and follow crew instructions. We've strayed slightly into restricted airspace and are being escorted back to our proper corridor. There is no cause for alarm." But in the galley, the communication system sparked, then went dark before rebooting into a mode Avonlea hadn't seen in years: military emergency protocols. Her stomach dropped faster than the plane had. "No, no, no," she whispered, fingers hovering over the panel. The system hummed to life with a sequence of lights she knew too well. Dormant authentication protocols were awakening, protocols tied to her military identity. She moved swiftly toward the cockpit, but Hammerton and 2 associates blocked her path. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded. "What's happening to this plane?" "Sir, I need to speak with the captain immediately," Avonlea insisted. "What makes you think you know anything about what's happening?" Hammerton sneered. "Why don't you just get back to serving drinks?" Before she could respond, the aircraft's speakers crackled with a new voice, not the captain's, but the terse, clipped tones of military communications. "Unidentified aircraft. You have entered restricted zone Foxtrot 7. Identify immediately." The plane's emergency system responded automatically. "Transglobal 237. Civilian aircraft under emergency protocols. Authentication. Colonel Avonlea Maddox. USAF Special Tactics. Call sign. Nightshade." The cabin fell into stunned silence. Every head turned toward Avonlea, standing frozen in the aisle, her face drained of color. "Repeat authentication," the military voice demanded. "Did you say Nightshade Actual?" Time seemed to stop in the pressurized cabin. The only sound was the hum of engines and the crackle of radio static. Then, "Control, we have visual confirmation." The F-22 lead pilot's voice had changed, a note of awe creeping in. "Request permission for honor protocol." Through the windows, passengers watched as the fighter jets peeled away in perfect synchronization, then returned to execute a mid-air salute maneuver, wings tilting in formal recognition. "Colonel Maddox, ma'am." The pilot's voice broke protocol completely now. "The Karakoram extraction. That was you. We studied your mission at the academy. They told us you were gone." Hammerton stood frozen, drink half raised to his mouth as understanding dawned across his features. The cockpit door opened and First Officer Caldwell emerged, his face ashen. "Colonel," he said, the title falling awkwardly from his lips, "we're experiencing complete navigational failure. The captain is asking for your assistance." Avonlea straightened, shedding the flight attendant persona like an ill-fitting uniform. Her eyes, suddenly sharp and focused, surveyed the cabin before she nodded once and stepped into the cockpit. "What's happening?" Zephyr whispered to no one in particular. An elderly man in 8D, who had been quietly observing throughout the flight, cleared his throat. "If she's who they say she is," he said softly, "then that's Colonel Avonlea Maddox of the 24th Special Tactics Squadron, the ghost of Karakoram." "The what?" someone asked. 5 years ago, 43 American hostages were taken by extremists in a remote mountain region, the man explained. Official reports said they were rescued by an anonymous special ops team. Unofficial stories said a single pilot flew an experimental aircraft into impossible terrain during a Category 5 storm, extracted all hostages, and engaged 6 enemy aircraft while escorting them to safety. "That's impossible," Hammerton said, but his voice lacked conviction. Through the thin door of the cockpit, passengers could hear snippets of conversation. "Complete electrical failure in navigation systems. We can reroute using stellar positioning and visual confirmation from the escort. Direct communication with Carrier Group 7 established." Avonlea's voice was different now, authoritative, precise, with the natural command of someone born to lead. The F-22s maintained their escort position, now clearly following her instructions rather than guiding the civilian craft. 30 minutes later, when the plane finally broke through cloud cover to reveal coastline, a collective sigh of relief swept through the cabin. The landing was textbook perfect, smoother than any in recent memory. As passengers prepared to disembark, Hammerton approached Avonlea, his earlier arrogance deflated. "I want to apologize for my behavior," he began awkwardly. Avonlea regarded him evenly. "Respect isn't something you give because of rank or what someone's done," she said quietly. "It's what you give because they're human." At the gate, a line of military personnel stood at attention. A gray-haired general approached as Avonlea stepped into the terminal. "Colonel Maddox," he said formally, "you've been missed." Avonlea removed her flight attendant scarf, a weight seeming to lift from her shoulders. "I wasn't ready to be found, General." Later, as the crew gathered their belongings, Zephyr worked up the courage to ask the question everyone wanted answered. "Why would someone with your background choose to be a flight attendant?" Avonlea looked out the terminal window, where the F-22s could still be seen circling in the distance. "After what happened at Karakoram," she began, then paused. "I needed to remember what I was fighting for. Ordinary people, ordinary moments, the freedom to just exist." 3 months later, Avonlea still worked transglobal flights, but subtle differences marked her interactions. Passengers treated her with a newfound respect, often double-taking when they recognized her from news reports that had leaked after Flight 237's incident. First Officer Caldwell, now transferred to another route, had been replaced by Captain Reina Torres, who consulted Avonlea on flight plans and security protocols without hesitation. On a crisp autumn morning, Avonlea stood in Arlington Cemetery wearing her full dress uniform for the first time in years. The weight of the medals across her chest felt foreign after so long in a flight attendant's polyester blend. She placed white lilies on a grave marked Captain Alara Quinn, call sign Daybreak. "Still flying, Elle," she whispered. "Just a different kind of service now." A twig snapped behind her. Avonlea didn't turn, recognizing the cadence of the approaching footsteps. "You're still hard to find, Colonel," General Thaddeus Blackwood said, stopping beside her. Unlike at the airport, he didn't stand at attention but adopted the respectful ease of an old colleague. "That's rather the point, sir," Avonlea replied, her gaze still fixed on Alara's headstone. "The inquiry is finally complete," Blackwood said after a moment of silence. "Your name has been cleared, officially." Avonley's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. 5 years too late for Alara. Yes, Blackwood agreed, uncharacteristically direct. We were wrong about Karakoram, wrong about everything. The intelligence was compromised from the start. The wind rustled through nearby trees, carrying the distant sounds of another military funeral. Why are you here, General? Avonley finally asked. The world's changed since you left, Nightshade. New threats, new players. We need you back. Avonley turned to face him fully, something fierce flashing in her eyes. I watched my best friend die because Command ignored our intel. I extracted 43 civilians under enemy fire while headquarters debated whether to even send backup. And then I was told to keep quiet about all of it to protect political careers. She shook her head once, definitively. I serve better where I am now. Blackwood handed her a thin file folder. Before you decide, there's something you should see. The real reason Karakoram went wrong. It wasn't just bureaucratic incompetence. He paused. It was sabotage. And we think the same people are active again. Avonley stared at the folder but didn't take it. I'm due at Dulles in 3 hours, General. Transglobal 443 to London won't fly itself. She placed her hand briefly on Alara's headstone, a silent promise, before walking away. Blackwood didn't follow, but called after her. The folder will be in your apartment. You'll want to see what's inside. The pre-flight ritual never changed, but Avonley had. She moved through the cabin of Transglobal 443 with the same efficiency, but a new awareness of the eyes that followed her. Some passengers requested selfies, which she politely declined. Others whispered as she passed. Fame was its own kind of prison, she'd discovered. Captain Torres caught her eye as she completed the final safety check. We've got an air marshal on board today, she murmured. Seat 27C. Might be nothing, but London routes have been flagged recently. Avonley nodded, mentally adding this to her constant assessment of the cabin. The passenger in 27C was unremarkable. Middle-aged, average build, forgettable features. A good choice for undercover work. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Transglobal Flight 443 to London Heathrow, Avonley announced, falling into the familiar script. Our flight time today will be approximately 7 hours and 20 minutes. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Avonley's phone vibrated in her pocket. A text from an unknown number. Folder contains intel on Hammerton Industries. Not a coincidence he was on your flight. She glanced toward first class. Royce Hammerton wasn't on today's passenger manifest, but the connection was unsettling. She deleted the message and continued her duties, but with heightened vigilance. Midway across the Atlantic, a passenger in business class began exhibiting signs of distress. Avonley reached him just as he clutched his chest, face contorted in pain. Sir, are you all right? She asked, already reaching for the emergency medical kit. Heart, he gasped. My medication. Carry on. Avonley located his bag and found the prescription bottle. As she administered the medication, following the labeled instructions, she noticed something odd. The pills didn't match the description on the bottle. They were similar enough that most wouldn't notice, but her training in chemical recognition during hostage scenarios had included pharmaceutical identification. The man's breathing steadied as the medication took effect. Thank you, he wheezed. Sir, these pills, she began cautiously. They don't match your prescription. Alarm flashed across his face before he managed to compose himself. Different manufacturer, same medication. Avonley nodded, seemingly accepting this explanation, but made a mental note to alert Captain Torres. As she stood, she noticed the air marshal watching the interaction with interest. In the galley, she spoke quietly into the intercom. Captain, we may have a situation with a passenger in 12B. Request private consultation. Torres's response was immediate. Cockpit access granted. Inside the cockpit, Avonley explained her concerns. The pills aren't what they claim to be. Could be nothing, but combined with the security alert for this route, I'm concerned. Could he be ill genuinely? Torres asked. Possibly, but his reaction when I mentioned the pills was suspicious. The co-pilot, Emerson, glanced between them. Should we divert? Torres considered this. Not without more concrete evidence. We'll notify ground security at Heathrow to have medical and security personnel ready. Avonley, keep an eye on him. As Avonlea returned to the cabin, the air pressure suddenly shifted. The plane lurched, then began a controlled but steep descent. "Ladies and gentlemen," Torres's voice came over the intercom, "we're experiencing a pressurization issue and will be descending to a lower altitude. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Avonlea moved quickly through the cabin, assisting passengers and checking oxygen levels. When she reached 12B, the man was gone. She scanned the cabin, spotting him emerging from the lavatory near the rear galley. As their eyes met, something shifted in his demeanor. Recognition, perhaps, or calculation. She approached casually. "Sir, you need to return to your seat. We're experiencing some turbulence." "Of course," he said smoothly, but made no move to comply. "You're her, aren't you? Colonel Nightshade. I saw the news." "Sir, please return to your seat," she repeated, maintaining her flight attendant persona. His hand moved slightly, shifting his jacket to reveal what looked like the outline of a weapon. "I think we should talk privately, Colonel, about Karakoram." In that moment, several things happened simultaneously. The air marshal rose from his seat, hand moving to his concealed weapon. The man from 12B noticed and tensed, reaching inside his jacket. And Avonlea, moving with the speed and precision that had made her legendary in combat situations, disarmed him in one fluid motion that most passengers mistook for her stumbling against him as the plane hit another pocket of turbulence. She had his weapon, a ceramic blade that had evaded security scanners, pressed against his ribs before anyone but the air marshal realized what was happening. "Sit down," she said quietly, all pretense of the accommodating flight attendant gone. "Now." The man's eyes widened, but he complied as the air marshal approached. "Federal Air Marshal," he announced discreetly. "I'll take it from here." "He mentioned Karakoram," Avonlea said in a low voice. "This isn't random." The marshal nodded, understanding the significance. "We'll secure him for the remainder of the flight. Captain should alert Heathrow security for immediate detention upon landing." As they secured the passenger, Avonlea noticed his carry-on was still in the overhead bin. "His bag should be searched," she told the marshal. "The pills he's carrying aren't what they claim to be." The remainder of the flight passed without incident, the man from 12B secured under the marshal's watch. When they landed at Heathrow, security personnel boarded before other passengers could deplane. "Colonel Maddox," the lead security officer said, approaching Avonlea, "we've been briefed on the situation. MI6 would like to speak with you." "I'm just a flight attendant," she replied, the lie now practiced. "Of course," he said with a knowing smile. "Nevertheless, they're quite insistent." In a private room at Heathrow, Avonlea found herself facing a woman in an impeccable suit who introduced herself simply as Whitehall. "The passenger you apprehended is Darius Varn, former military intelligence turned private contractor," Whitehall explained. "He's been on our watch list for months. The pills you identified contain a neurotoxin developed for covert operations." "Target?" Avonlea asked, slipping into operational language despite herself. "We believe he was en route to eliminate this man." Whitehall slid a photograph across the table. It showed Royce Hammerton with several international officials. "Hammerton Industries has been contracted to develop a new security protocol for NATO. His death would have been catastrophic for the project." "Hammerton," Avonlea repeated, recalling the arrogant passenger from Flight 237 and the text message she'd received. "There's more to this. General Blackwood approached me this morning with information about Karakoram, said it was connected to Hammerton." Whitehall's expression remained neutral, but Avonlea caught the slight tension in her posture. "Blackwood contacted you directly? That's irregular." "So is finding assassins on commercial flights," Avonlea countered. "What aren't you telling me?" After a moment's calculation, Whitehall sighed. "Hammerton Industries provided the intelligence for the Karakoram operation, intelligence that proved fatally flawed." "Not flawed," Avonlea corrected, voice hard. "Sabotaged. That's what Blackwood claimed. We believe someone within Hammerton's organization deliberately compromised the mission. The same person may now be targeting Hammerton himself to prevent exposure." Avonlea absorbed this, the pieces falling into place. "Why tell me this now?" "Because you're already involved, Colonel. The incident on Flight 237 brought you back into the open. Since then, there have been 3 separate intelligence queries about your current whereabouts from organizations that shouldn't know you exist." "I'm a flight attendant," Avonlea insisted. "That's my life now." Whitehall smiled thinly. A flight attendant who just disarmed a professional assassin without spilling a drink. Your cover was effective until recently, but now you're exposed. We need to discuss your options. Before Avonlea could respond, her phone vibrated with another text. Don't trust Whitehall. Check the folder. Roof in 10. B. She glanced up to find Whitehall watching her closely. Problem? Airline schedule change, Avonlea lied smoothly. I need to contact my supervisor. Of course. We'll continue this conversation shortly. There's a secure phone in the adjoining room you can use. Once alone, Avonlea quickly assessed her options. The folder Blackwood mentioned was in her apartment, thousands of miles away. But his warning about Whitehall couldn't be ignored. With a decisive nod to herself, she slipped out of the room, evading security with the ease of someone trained to navigate hostile territory undetected. On the roof of Heathrow's Terminal 5, wind whipped across the landing pad where a helicopter waited, rotors already spinning. General Blackwood stood by the open door. I was beginning to think you wouldn't come, he called over the noise. I almost didn't, Avonlea replied, approaching cautiously. Give me one reason to trust you after Karakoram. Blackwood reached into his coat and withdrew a small device. He pressed a button and an audio recording played, barely audible over the helicopter. The Karakoram team must not return, especially Nightshade. She's seen too much. Make it look like hostile action. Avonlea froze, recognizing the voice. That's Deputy Director Whitehall. 5 years ago, before her promotion, Blackwood confirmed. She was Hammerton's handler. When your team discovered irregularities in the intelligence, she ordered your elimination. Why come to me now? Because Hammerton has finally realized he was used. He's gathered evidence against Whitehall and her associates. They tried to assassinate him on your flight today. And what do you want from me? Help us bring them down, Colonel. For Alara, for the 43 civilians, for yourself. The helicopter's rotors grew louder, drowning out all other sound. Avonlea stood on the precipice of a decision that would irrevocably change her carefully constructed new life. Behind her, the roof access door burst open. Whitehall emerged with security personnel, her composed facade replaced by cold fury. Colonel Maddox, she called out, step away from the helicopter. Blackwood is compromised. Avonlea looked between them, past and present colliding in a moment of crystal clarity. Without a word, she made her choice, moving decisively toward her future. Avonlea moved toward Blackwood and the waiting helicopter, her decision made in the space between heartbeats. 5 years of questions demanded answers. 5 years of civilian life had not dulled her instincts, and every one of them screamed that Whitehall was the threat. Colonel Maddox, you are making a serious mistake, Whitehall called out, her voice carrying over the rotor wash. Blackwood was discharged from service 3 months ago. He has no authority. Avonlea hesitated, glancing back at Whitehall. What? He's been deemed psychologically unfit for command, Whitehall continued, advancing slowly with her security team. Check his credentials if you don't believe me. Blackwood's face hardened. We don't have time for this, Colonel. Wheels up now. Show me your identification, Avonlea demanded, stepping away from both of them, creating a triangle of tension on the helipad. Blackwood's expression shifted subtly. You know who I am, Nightshade. We need to move. Your credentials, General, she repeated, her voice taking on the commanding tone that had once directed special operations teams through impossible missions. Whitehall smiled thinly. He can't show you what he doesn't have. In that moment of hesitation, Avonlea noticed the pilot's reflection in the helicopter's window. His posture was wrong for military transport, too casual, lacking discipline, a mercenary, not military. Neither of you is telling me the whole truth, she said, backing toward the edge of the helipad. Blackwood reached inside his jacket. Avonlea tensed, prepared for a weapon, but instead he withdrew a leather wallet and flipped it open to reveal his military identification. The problem was immediately apparent. The holographic security features were missing, a counterfeit obvious to anyone with security clearance. You're not Blackwood, Avonlea stated, dropping into a defensive stance. The man's facade cracked, replaced by cold efficiency. Plan B, he barked at the pilot, who immediately raised a weapon. Avonlea moved with the practiced precision that had made her legendary, diving behind a ventilation unit as gunfire erupted from both the helicopter and Whitehall's security team. In the chaos, she assessed her options with tactical clarity. The roof access door was now blocked by Whitehall's people. The helicopter provided the only other escape route, but was controlled by hostiles. A memory surfaced. Alara's voice during a training exercise years ago. When surrounded, change the battlefield. Keeping low, Avonlea maneuvered between mechanical units toward the edge of the roof. The false Blackwood barked orders to the pilot, who adjusted the helicopter to cut off her escape, precisely as she'd anticipated. When the helicopter swung around, Avonlea broke cover in a full sprint, not away from the aircraft but directly toward it. The unexpected movement caused the pilot to hesitate just for a second, which was all she needed. With a leap honed by years of special operations training, she caught the helicopter's landing skid and swung herself inside, catching the pilot completely off guard. The confined space of the cockpit limited his ability to use his weapon effectively. 3 precise strikes later, Avonlea had control of both the pilot and the helicopter, leaving the imposter Blackwood stranded on the roof with Whitehall's forces closing in. "Radio frequency," she demanded, pressing the pilot's own weapon against his neck. "Delta channel, 121.5, he gasped. Avonlea adjusted the radio. "This is Colonel Avonlea Maddox, call sign Nightshade, declaring security protocol Indigo. Authentication code Sierra November 99042, requesting immediate verification and secure extraction." For 3 long seconds, there was only static. Then, "Authentication confirmed, Nightshade. This is RAF Northolt. We have your position. Friendly forces en route, ETA 4 minutes. Negative, Northolt. I have commandeered an unauthorized aircraft with a hostile combatant, requesting landing clearance and security detail. Clearance granted, Nightshade. Security standing by." Avonlea glanced back at the roof where Whitehall's team had surrounded the fake Blackwood. "Let's go," she told the pilot. "And if you try anything, remember I've flown much more complicated aircraft than this one." 20 minutes later, Avonlea sat in a secure room at RAF Northolt, facing a video screen where the real General Blackwood, older and grayer than his impersonator but with the same commanding presence, regarded her with a mixture of relief and respect. "Colonel Maddox," he said formally. "Welcome back to the land of the living." "I never left, sir," she replied. "Just changed uniforms." "Indeed," he nodded. "The man who impersonated me has been identified as Conrad Mercer, former Special Forces turned private military contractor. He's worked for various interests, including, most recently, Hammerton Industries." "Hammerton," Avonlea repeated. "He was on my flight 3 months ago, the one where my identity was exposed." "Yes, and that was no coincidence. Royce Hammerton has been under investigation for selling classified intelligence to foreign entities. The Karakoram operation was compromised by intel he provided." Avonlea absorbed this, the pieces finally falling into place. "And Whitehall?" "Deputy Director Whitehall has been working to build a case against Hammerton for years. When your identity was revealed on that flight, it accelerated matters. Hammerton realized you could identify intelligence discrepancies from Karakoram that would implicate him. So he sent Mercer to eliminate me, using your identity to gain my trust," Avonlea concluded. "Precisely. Whitehall was trying to protect you, though her methods leave something to be desired." Avonlea's mind raced, connecting dots from the past 5 years. The assassin on the London flight, Darius Varn. He wasn't targeting Hammerton, was he? He was working for him. "We believe his target was actually you, Colonel. Your schedule as a flight attendant made you predictable. Hammerton's organization has been eliminating anyone who could connect him to the Karakoram intelligence failure." The door opened and Whitehall herself entered, looking considerably less composed than she had on the helipad. "Colonel Maddox," she acknowledged. "Quite an impressive display of skill today." "Deputy Director," Avonlea replied coolly. "I believe you owe me some answers about Captain Quinn." Whitehall nodded, taking a seat. "Captain Alara Quinn discovered inconsistencies in Hammerton's intelligence 3 days before the Karakoram operation. She reported her concerns directly to me, bypassing standard protocols because she suspected internal compromise. I assigned her to your team to investigate further during the mission." "She never told me," Avonlea said, the old pain resurfacing. "She was under orders to maintain operational security until she could confirm her suspicions. When your team was ambushed, we believe it was specifically to silence her. Your survival was unexpected." "Convenient explanation," Avonlea noted, skepticism evident. Blackwood intervened from the screen. "We have recovered Captain Quinn's personal effects from storage, Colonel. Among them was a secured data drive containing her findings. It corroborates everything the deputy director has said. Whitehall placed a small flash drive on the table. Her final report. She identified Hammerton as the source of compromised intelligence and traced financial transactions linking him to hostile foreign interests. Avonlea stared at the drive, Alara's last testament. Why wait 5 years to tell me this? Because we couldn't be certain who else was involved, Whitehall admitted. After Karakoram, you disappeared so thoroughly that we decided to let you stay hidden while we continued the investigation. When your identity was exposed 3 months ago, everything accelerated. What happens now? Avonlea asked, looking between Whitehall and Blackwood. That depends on you, Colonel, Blackwood replied. Officially, you've been on deep cover assignment these past 5 years. Your commission was never terminated. You can return to active duty with full rank and privileges. Or you can return to civilian life with our gratitude and protection. But I should warn you, Hammerton knows who you are now. Even with him in custody, his organization remains active. They won't stop coming for you. Avonlea considered this, thinking of the life she'd built as a flight attendant. The ordinary moments she'd treasured, the passengers she'd served, the normalcy she'd craved after the intensity of special operations. There's a third option, she said finally. I want to finish what Alara started. I want to dismantle Hammerton's entire operation, not just arrest him. Blackwood and Whitehall exchanged glances. That would require a specialized team, Whitehall began. I already have one, Avonlea interrupted. Captain Torres from Transglobal, former Navy intelligence, the air marshal from yesterday's flight, Garcia, who I suspect reports directly to you, Deputy Director, and Zephyr, who is far too observant and skilled to be just a flight attendant. Whitehall's expression confirmed her suspicions. You noticed. I notice everything. It's why I'm still alive. Avonlea leaned forward. I want operational control. No more secrets, no more need-to-know restrictions. Alara died because information was compartmentalized. I won't let that happen again. 3 weeks later, Transglobal Flight 552 to Singapore prepared for boarding. In the first-class cabin, Avonlea performed her pre-flight checks with familiar efficiency, though now her attention was focused on the passenger manifest rather than the oxygen masks. Target confirmed. Torres's voice came through her nearly invisible earpiece. Boarding now, seat 4A. Avonlea glanced up as a distinguished man in his 60s entered the aircraft. Lawrence Kittredge, Hammerton's chief financial officer, and the man Alara had identified as the primary conduit for classified intelligence sales. Welcome aboard, Mr. Kittredge, Avonlea greeted him with a practiced smile. May I take your coat? Thank you, he replied absently, surrendering his overcoat without really looking at her. She hung the garment carefully, using the movement to conceal her scan of its contents. In the pocket, exactly where intelligence had suggested it would be, was a secure phone with access to Hammerton's encrypted communication network. Sparrow has landed, she murmured, using the call sign for Kittredge. Package confirmed. Copy that, Nightshade, Garcia's voice responded in her ear. Extraction team standing by in Singapore. As the last passengers boarded, Avonlea caught sight of Zephyr moving efficiently through the economy cabin, no longer the inexperienced flight attendant but a skilled operative with the observational abilities that had earned her a place on this team. The mission was simple on paper. Accompany Kittredge to Singapore, where he expected to meet with foreign buyers for classified NATO security protocols. Use his secure phone to access Hammerton's network and identify all operatives. Then let the extraction team take him into custody while simultaneously raiding identified network locations worldwide. As the aircraft doors closed and preparations for takeoff began, Avonlea felt a familiar calm settle over her. This was what she'd been trained for, what she'd excelled at. The years as a flight attendant had not diminished her skills, but had given her something equally valuable, perspective on what she was fighting to protect. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Transglobal Flight 552 to Singapore, she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the cabin. My name is Colonel Avonlea Maddox, and I'll be your flight attendant today. She noted with satisfaction the sudden alert tension in Kittredge's posture as he recognized her name. By the time he fully processed its significance, it would be too late. The net was already closing. Our flight time today will be approximately 18 hours, she continued smoothly. We'll be serving you with the same care and attention that I once gave to 43 hostages in Karakoram." Kittredge's head snapped up, eyes wide with recognition and fear. Avonlea met his gaze directly, dropping all pretense of the accommodating flight attendant. "We have a lot to discuss about your employer, Mr. Kittredge. It's going to be a very long flight." 6 months later, Avonlea stood once again at Arlington Cemetery, this time with a small group of officials and a framed presidential commendation. The operation she'd led had dismantled Hamilton's entire network, recovering countless classified documents and preventing a major breach of NATO security. She placed fresh lilies on Alara's grave. "Mission complete, Daybreak," she whispered. "You were right all along." General Blackwood approached, standing respectfully at a distance until she acknowledged him. "The President's waiting, Colonel." "Just a moment more, sir," she requested. When she finally turned away from the grave, her decision was already made. The commendation would be accepted, the promotion to Brigadier General would not. There was important work still to be done, work that required the unique perspective she'd gained in her years of anonymity. "I'll be keeping the transglobal uniform," she told Blackwood as they walked toward the waiting motorcade. "There are more people like Hamilton out there, people who think themselves untouchable because they fly in first class while others serve them drinks. And you'll be there, watching," Blackwood nodded understanding. "More than watching," Avonlea corrected. "I'll be building a new kind of team, personnel who move through the world unseen, unappreciated, underestimated, the kind of people no one notices until it's too late." "Operation Nightshade," Blackwood mused, "has a certain poetry to it." Avonlea smiled, thinking of Zephyr and Torres and the dozens of other overlooked individuals she'd already identified for recruitment. Former military working as hotel staff, intelligence analysts driving ride shares, combat veterans serving coffee, the invisible ones, the underestimated, the heroes hiding in plain sight. "You know, General," she said as they reached the car, "the most dangerous person in any room is the one everyone looks past. Remember that the next time you fly commercial." Blackwood chuckled. "I'll never look at a flight attendant the same way again." "Good," Avonlea replied, sliding into the vehicle. "That's exactly the point." As the motorcade pulled away from Arlington, Avonlea gazed out at the endless rows of headstones, each representing someone who had served, someone who had sacrificed. Some were remembered with honors and ceremony. Others, like Alara, had died with their greatest contributions known only to a few. But they all mattered, the recognized and the anonymous alike, the visible heroes and the invisible ones. Somewhere overhead, a commercial airliner traced its path across the sky, carrying hundreds of passengers who would never know how many times they'd been protected by those they'd never thought to thank. By the soldier-turned-baggage handler who spotted an unattended package. By the former intelligence officer working airport security who recognized a face on a watch list. By the flight attendant with the precise movements and watchful eyes who had once commanded elite squadrons. They were everywhere, these guardians. Invisible until the moment they were needed. Unsung until crisis revealed their true nature. Underestimated until it was too late to stop them. And now, they would have a leader who understood both worlds. Someone who had lived in the shadows of classified operations and in the thankless trenches of customer service. Someone who knew the value of both the extraordinary mission and the ordinary moment. Colonel Avonlea Maddox smiled as she straightened her transglobal uniform one final time before meeting the president. Some battles were fought with fighter jets and special tactics teams, others with kind words and a drink cart. She had mastered both battlefields, and in both arenas she had learned the most important lesson of all. True strength lay not in being recognized for who you are, but in doing what needs to be done regardless of whether anyone notices. The heroes among us walk unrecognized every day, serving in ways large and small. The teacher who was once a war photographer, shaping young minds with the wisdom of all she's witnessed. The bus driver who saved lives as a paramedic, still transporting people safely from one destination to another. The flight attendant who once commanded the skies in ways few will ever know, continuing to protect others without seeking glory. Their stories remain largely untold, their sacrifices unsung. But sometimes, just sometimes, the world gets a glimpse of who they truly are. And in that moment of recognition, we remember that heroism doesn't always wear a uniform or a cape or medals. Sometimes, It simply asks if you'd like coffee or tea.